Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at some special use VFR space. This is actually going to be the first of most likely 3 videos that we're going to be taking a look at this because each one's kind of got its own unique quirks. So today we're going to be taking a look at these things called VFR Flyways. Now this is a phenomenon that's in the United States and North American airspace. There are probably things similar to this around the world, but I was not able to find them directly. So we're going to take a look at what we have so that everybody can give a chance to check it out. So let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, what is a VFR flyway? Basically, a VFR flyway is going to be a zone where it's designed for VFR traffic that happens to be around a Class Bravo airspace. In this case, we have actually a nice little image of Atlanta. So what I'll do real quickly here is I'll actually swap my screens real fast so you have a better look at it. There we go. So what they are these little tiny little blue lines that they're going to be giving us pathways to get around this big, scary, nasty airspace. If I actually flip over real quick to a World VFR, you can see that Atlanta is a gigantic and extremely busy area. So what they actually did is if you take the TAC chart, which looks like this, and you flip it on the back, you get this thing that looks a little bit like this. So the VFR flyways are going to be zones where you don't need air traffic control. Likewise, they're going to be designed to help get you through this area without accidentally having to cross into it. Now, don't get these confused with the other 2 types of VFR, IFR kind of things, but we'll take a look at those end of the day. So the flight we're going to be taking along one of these VFR flyways is going to take us from Delta 7 Tree. It's going to take us down to this waypoint called the Victor Papa Golf Hotel Tango. We have to be at an altitude below 4,000 feet in our case because we're heading west. We're going to be doing 2,500. Theoretically, we could select 4,000 for this purpose, but we're not going to. We're going to proceed directly, barely underneath this airspace, Victor Papa Juliet Bravo Foxtrot. We can pass through that one, hit this guy right here, and then what we're going to do is stay below 5,000. We're going to pop right up here and basically take ourselves over to West Georgia Regional once we get away from that 30 nautical miles. Now, keep in mind, these charts are pretty easy to follow. If you actually take a look at, if we're coming here from the southwest, for example, we'd be coming, let's say, out of here. You're going to West Point Lake. One thing you can see is it says stay below 5,000. The reason they're telling you to do that is because 5,000 feet and above you are big, scary, high-speed jet traffic. So even though this is not part of the flyway, it's still a recommended way to get in and out of this incredibly crowded airspace. Now, the one I really get a kick out of is if you look really carefully, there's actually an inner ring to these VFR flyways. You have this one right here where you could take off from a Fulton County executive, for example, and you could actually go, whoa, right where the river bend is. Notice, by the way, they provide us with a little landmark to kind of give us a clue here. And they can actually pop you over here, and then you could get you out this way. Again, each one of those is very straight ways. The way we're going to be taking a look is going to be this one, very straightforward here. So let's go ahead and build that plan real quick. I'm going to go take off from here. We're going to go down to Vabite. Whoop. Oh. It did not tolerate that very well. Let's head down here, right click. You're going to let me have that point, or you're going to be all, there it is right there. Scoot over here. We're going to pick this one right here as well. We'll say vroom, 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 and then we're going to pop over here as well. All right, let's go ahead and pop into the simulator and do it to it. All right, so the good news is I've gotten everything already pre-programmed here as far as the computer goes. Everything is the way it should be. I've got all my correct stuff. The important thing you got to remember, though, is altitude's a big deal. Oh, by the way, speaking of things that are important, there is a limit to the airspeed we can do this operation at. This is one of the reasons why I chose this aircraft and not the TBM for it. It says indicated of 250. Also notice that below 2,500 feet or within 4 nautical miles of a CH Charlie Delta, you can't go past 200 knots. It also says, this is really important, if you're underneath Class B airspace, you need to maintain 200 knots or less. Now, that's just kind of one of those little things that's like, oh, you're ruining my fun. Because obviously we could go ripping along pretty aggressively if we had to here. So let's go ahead and get this row in a show here. We're going to be going 2,500 feet today, which feels low. And when you see the local terrain, you'll understand why that's so low. So whenever you're operating in any sort of tight VFR space like this, you've got to remember that there's going to be other traffic going basically both directions. So you have to be very careful with it. So let's go ahead and execute a standard takeoff here. Again, I'm not doing anything sophisticated. We're just going to fly this handy VFR flyway. Now, one thing I mentioned at the beginning of the video is that there are other types of these airspaces, these kind of half VFR, half IFR Class Bravo airspaces. And the other ones are a little different. Whoa. Got to make sure my trim is set before we do that next time. Whoa, that's the flight sim right there. See this? That's the flight sim. Yeah, you don't have that problem in the real plane because what you do is you just put a little bit of pressure on the controls and you're on your way kind of a thing. So what'll happen is there's two other kinds. One is where they're going to actually pop a hole through the airspace where basically you can fly through it, just like we're going to do now. And then the other one is even more terrifying. It's a specific VFR airspace that's going to, they're actually going to do air traffic control and guide you on a bunch of waypoints through a tight zone. Again, there are a bunch of different kinds depending on the different scenario that you're working on. We'll look at those separately. One thing I do want to do, though, is I want to make sure my RPM is set correctly. That looks pretty good right there. That's pretty solid. Like I said, it's a pretty straightforward route. Now, the goal here, again, is just to allow VFR traffic a place to go so it does not get in the way of the big, scary, high-speed IFR traffic that typically is going to be operating above it. So right now, I'm doing about 170. I must have left real weather on because I'm getting bounced pretty good here today. And all we're going to do is pop up to 2,500 feet, and that's it. Like I said, not a difficult flight in our particular position here at all. Not a bad day in Georgia, I guess. Understanding that the devil went down to Georgia, and I believe he was looking for soul to steal. He was way behind, so he was looking to make a deal. So I got to keep an eye out for that as I'm flying through these airspaces, of course. All right, we're just going to go ahead and level off in just a moment, and then we're going to kind of proceed. Wow, turbulent today. We have a bunch of thunderstorms coming through my region today, so I have a feeling that it's going to be very bumpy pretty much everywhere up in the northern side of things. We're going to pop up just a little bit. Oh, yeah. So one thing they teach you in the flight school about turbulence is you don't dance with the wind. If it's going to bounce you around, you got to just let it bounce you around. Don't think you can fly out of it or fly through it, if that makes sense. There we go. That's pretty good. I'm going to push the nose down. Go ahead and tap that real quick. We'll go ahead and do altitude hold here. Alt. All right, so we've got roll AP. We're going to flip on the navigation mode. Now we're going to make sure our speed is at or below 200 knots for this entire process. So right now we're actually just outside of kind of the danger zone here. We're going to basically pick up a bunch of speed, and what I'll do is I will zoom out on the G1000 so you have a better idea of kind of what we're dealing with here. So let me go ahead and start zooming out here. There it is. So remember the airspace here, you can see the first layer of airspace is the one we're going through at this time. What I'll actually do is I'll call it up so you can see it okay. There we go. Nice. So we're just cutting across this line right here. And again, this line has a limitation, which is going to be 4,000 feet or less. Right now we're at 2,500, so we're completely safe as far as that goes. It's also worth noting, by the way, that all the arrows that we saw in the VFR flyway chart are always going to be, actually not always, where they're going to be bidirectional, and sometimes they'll be unidirectional. In this particular case, if you're trying to get around this, notice what they do here. They actually make you go down and around to this position, and if you want to go that way, how do you get there? You have to actually go out and then come back around again. You can see just how tight it is. Well, something I want to say too is none of these are mandatory. Remember, air traffic control is not telling you what to do. These are recommended in order to stay safe. Obviously, if you go bumping into the next guy's airspace, which is very clearly indicated right here, you're going to have bigger problems. But again, that's just worth noting. Okay, so we can take a look here. We're just crossing by Victor Papa Golf Hotel Tango. You can see where that 4,000-foot band is directly over us, so this airspace is literally chilling right here, right now. We are not in Atlanta's airspace at this time, as crazy as this seems. And again, this was the intended use of this. There's another one of these VFR flyways directly to the south here, which gives us a slightly higher ceiling. Obviously, if the weather is really, really bumpy down here and we want to try to fly higher, it might be safer to actually go outside. What's a big difference between this one and that one, though, is this particular one has its own waypoint that kind of helps us guide us along. The other one does not. It's just kind of look out the window and go. You'll see something very, very similar to that later on when we do the IFR version of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit here. 1, 2. So we have a button on all airplanes when we don't feel like sitting around all afternoon. We can just press the button real fast. And what it does is it makes time go faster so that you get to your destination sooner without having to, stress out about things like, trying to get there on time and things like that. So at this point, we're now completely inside the airspace. We want to be really, really careful. As you can tell by this line, we are painfully close to the airspace edge right here. The airspace edge is probably right over here. Like it's literally that close. So we want to be very, very mindful of this. If you're going to do this maneuver in VATSIM, you can get away with this entire thing without requiring something nice like flight following at any point. Because again, the airspace is over here. We're over here. We're actually completely safe. And interestingly enough, if you saw the original chart, we can actually fly at a lower altitude and sneak in. All right, here we go. Now, one of the cool things is the part of the country that I live, we do not have any airspace like this. We simply, we have, of course, JFK and LaGuardia, and we have Boston to the north and all those other kind of things. Those are really, really nasty, really, really dangerous airspaces, but we don't have to put up with Atlanta airspace, which is especially ridiculous as far as what these kind of things look like. I'm actually going to cheat even harder. Watch this. There we go. So now we're crossing into our last waypoint, and now things are going to start getting a little more interesting for us. We now need to go ahead and decide what it is we're going to be doing as far as figuring out this last kind of component here. Now, the interesting thing is once I get outside of the airspace that I'm going to be operating out of, you're pretty much free to go. So even though we're technically supposed to be sticking at below that altitude that we saw a little bit earlier, we can actually climb to a higher altitude if we needed. I'm actually going to go ahead and call up the chart again real fast so you can kind of see what I mean. So we're hitting this point right here. So the thing we have to watch out for is once we're outside of this airspace, we're outside of this airspace. We could hypothetically, even though it tells us to go below 4,000 feet, we could technically do it. But do you notice this little thing here that says 4,000 feet and above? It's basically giving us a clue saying, oh, by the way, airliners are going to be right above your head if you want to do that. So ideally what we want to do is we want to kind of follow this railroad track, and right when we get outside of the town, that's when we're probably going to switch over and gain any altitude we need to. But again, if we come over to this airport real quickly here, you'll realize that it's almost pointless to do because the surveyed elevation is basically our current altitude. So again, not that big of a deal. All right, we're all squared up, ready to land. Let's slow down a tiny bit here. And we're just going to go ahead and pop this thing down on the ground after a successful flight. So hopefully this video was helpful. There's different VFR flyby places in different parts. Again, you're going to see them commonly around zones that when you have the very, 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 very large airspaces that tend to be very, very complicated. And in this particular case, like I said, we were flying around Atlanta, Georgia, which in the United States is tremendously complicated. You can actually head out to LAX. They've got one of these. Pretty much anybody who has a TAC chart is going to have one of these VFR flyby methods here. Next time what we'll do is we'll take a look at the next kind, which is going to be a little more interesting because basically what's going to happen with those is we're going to have to fly a specific VFR path as opposed to using handy-dandy waypoints in order to get ourselves all lined up. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and reduce speed here and pop this thing down on the ground for a nice relaxing flight. Turbulence is a little interesting this morning. The interesting thing too is I just checked the METAR itself, and flight sim sometimes grabs weather that's not really there, but that's okay for us because like I said, we'll be able to pop this thing on the ground no problem. All right, as always, there's some form of crosswind. I swear in the real world, you never actually get to do a regular landing. They're always crosswind landings. It's just a thing that happens so often that you just kind of get used to it, I guess is kind of how I feel about it. Now, one of my buddies actually flies Cessna 310s, and he comments that unless it's a more than a 25-knot crosswind, you don't even notice, which I don't know how much I believe that. I feel like 25 knots is pretty significant. But at the same token, as you have a higher wing loading, you are much more less likely to be affected by nasty turbulence. And exactly as I predicted. It just kind of happens that way every time, I swear. All right, I haven't landed one of these in a while, so this should be good. We're going to get right over the end of the runway. Go ahead and pull the throttle back smoothly. Whoops, I hate it when I accidentally touch the view button. A little wide, but that's fine. Hold down the brakes, and other than that, enjoy.